Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. Welcome back to yet another episode of webinar series powered by IEEE at the NorthCap University. My name is Khushi Garg. Thank you for all joining all over again. Let's squash into the webinar Producing Music Theory. Well quoted by Daniel Lanois, it's that element of surprise when you lose control, you discover new things. Earlier, music was constrained to big instruments that you had to carry along. What if you could produce music right on your computer? What if you just needed one session to channelize the inner audio profile into creating magic? To discuss all this, today we have our guest speaker, Mr. Chandra Mauli sir. Welcome, sir. Chandramouli sir is an engineer, musician, and producer. He's also a part of the band named Karmanya, where he learned various musical techniques from participating on multiple occasions in the northern part of India for 2 years. With the profound knowledge of various instruments such as the keyboard, guitar, tabla, and many more. Before that, guys, if you have any questions, just drop them below in the comment section. Sir will take them at the end. Sir, the platform is all yours and you may begin and I'll see you at the other end with Q&A.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Okay, so welcome everyone to the webinar hosted by the IEEE Student Council. So in this webinar, we'll be talking about music theory and music production, but it's gonna be for beginners. It's not advanced stuff. So let me share my screen and I'll start. I'll get into it. Okay, so okay, so now first we'll talk about music theory, then we'll talk about the music production aspect of this webinar, and all the Q and A's we'll be doing that by the end of this webinar, not during it. So now music theory. Music theory is important for an engineer and a producer in terms of a lot of things. So like with some fundamental knowledge and listening skills, the user can notice, user meaning the producer or engineer, can notice the tuning errors in the mix or any instrument or any sound source in general. And you can also spot arrangement issues which might be in your mix session. But apart from that, the main thing that is the most important, which is communication with the musicians. So when you know like the basics of music theory, then you can communicate your ideas. And if like a musician is maybe like singing out of tune, or his instrument is not in tune, you can correct him. And that is why it comes into it comes into play. And that is why uh, an engineer as well as a producer should know the basics of music theory. Now, there's one more thing which is very it's a bonus of knowing music theory, which is your production skills, your music production skills, they get refined. So you are able to produce better bass lines, better melodies, and you can also work on the arrangement nicely. You can give it a proper structure so that it evokes an emotional response. Now, there are a lot of musical jargons. So some of them are mentioned here, and I'll be talking about all of these in detail in the next slides. Now, if you look at the keyboard, there are 12 notes, and you can use a number of permutations using these 12 notes to form a beautiful melody, chord progressions, bass lines, and a lot of things. Now, if you're familiar with the piano, which is right here, if you're familiar with it, you'll notice that these specific keys, they repeat after a certain number of notes, which is 12 notes. So that is called an octave. So 12 notes coming together, it's called an octave. Now, there are different ways of naming the black keys. You can call them sharps or flats depending on the scale you're in. But basically, it means the same key. If you're referring to C sharp, you can also call it a D flat, but uh, there's just a small difference when it comes to writing. Like when you're writing scales, you cannot, for example, if you are in C minor scale, which is this. I hope you guys can hear it. Uh, so basically, what I played was C, D, and then D sharp, but I will not call it D sharp because I'm already using the D note. So that is why I'm going to represent the D sharp note by calling it an E flat. So then F, F sharp, F, G, G sharp, A sharp, and C. So I think that clears the doubt that like when you should be using sharps and flats while naming your scale. Now, what is a scale? In this webinar, we'll be talking about two scales in general, which is a major scale and a minor scale. So a major scale has a happy feel to it. Like generally it does have it, but you can use the variation in chord progressions, which might even give it a sad feel. It's not, it's become a cliche right now that a major scale is always happy, which is not necessary. You can use uh, like variation in your chord progressions, and you can give it a sad feel as well. Same goes for the minor scale. Minor scale is usually associated with the sad feel, but again with a different permutation of chord progression, you can give it a happy feel as well. Now, what is a scale? Let's get into it. So scale is basically, it's comprised of different notes using the 12 notes that we have on the piano in an octave. So if you see here, which is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then the C repeats itself again. So that means that the octave has changed. Now we have gone one octave higher. So let's say if we were on second octave, from here it will be the third octave. Now to form a major scale, what you have to do is, if you're in the key of C, you can go from C to D, then E, F, G, A, and B, then back again to C. Now you'll notice that from C to D, there's a difference of two semitones. Now what is a semitone? If I go from C to C sharp, C to C sharp, it's one semitone. But if I go from C to D, it's two semitones, which is also called a tone. Now, a major scale, basically it follows a specific pattern of keys. Basically, it follows a basic math, which is from C to D is one whole note, but from D to E flat is one semitone. So if you look at the pattern closely, you will get to know that it follows whole, 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 half, whole, 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 half. And apologies, I went into the minor scale just by like mistake. The major scale is C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Now from C to D is a whole note, D to E is a whole note, E to F is a half note. So that is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So that is how you form a major scale. And you can do that in different keys, not just C. You can go from C to F, and if you want to form a major scale using the key of F, what you can do is you can just use the same formula, and you can form the major scale, which is that is a major scale using the same specific pattern. So the notes, they have a specific time like interval in between. So if you follow that, you can form the major scale using key of using any key. Now when it comes to minor scale, there's only a slight change. So let's say if we're in the key of C, which is, now from C we'll go to D, but instead of going to the E note, we'll step it down to one semitone, which is a E flat. Now the F and G remains the same, but again the A changes to A flat, B changes to B flat. So the minor scale is C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, and C. So that is how you form a minor scale. This also follows a specific interval of there's a specific interval in between notes. So if you go from C to D, it's a whole note. But if you go from D to E flat, it's a semitone. Now from E flat to F, it's two semitones, which is a whole note. From F to G, it's the same thing. From G to A flat, it's a semitone. But from A flat to B flat, it's a whole tone. So if you follow this specific pattern, you can work in any key and you can form minor scale for any key, let it be C, D, E, A, or anything. So that is how you form a minor scale. Now, what is a chord? So basically, if you hit two notes simultaneously on an instrument, let it be piano or guitar, the result is a chord. Or you can also call it a triad. And there's a lot of chords that can be played, but for this webinar we will only cover major and minor chords. Now major and minor chords, how do you form a chord? Before we get into this, let me tell you how to form a chord. So if you're in the key of C, if you hold the C note, apologies for that, if you hold the C note, then you go from C to E, which is two whole steps, and it's also called a third in the major scale, which is a major third. So now if you hold the fifth as well, which is a G, it forms a C major chord, which is that is a C major chord. Now to form a minor chord, there's only one thing that you have to do. You just have to change the third from a major third to a minor third. So basically step it down to one semitone. So E, from E to E flat, if you change it, the feel entirely changes. So from like a happy feel to a sad feel. So this is C major. But if you change the third to a minor third, it becomes a C minor chord, which is giving it that sad feel. So I hope that is clear. Now, major and minor chords, which I already talked about, like how to do that. And there's this specific thing that you have to do, which is change the major third to a minor third. So that is the third note changes from major to a minor third. Hope that's clear. Now, you can form different chord progressions using basically maths, So let's say if I'm in the key of C, apologies for that. I'll show it to you in the DAW. So this is the key of C. Now if I want to make the chords for the family of C, for the scale of, let's say, C major scale, which is C, C, So let's form these notes now. Now, if I wanted to form the chords, what I can do is just a sec. Now for the C major chord, I have C note here, then I'm gonna draw in the E note, which is the third, which is a major third since we are in C major scale, and the fifth, which is G. So that is a C major chord. Now the next note is D. So in order to form the chord, let's just draw in the fifth first, which is the A note. Now for the third, should it be major or like major or minor, or what note we should use? So when working in the C major scale, as you can see here, for major chord progressions, if you're in the C major scale, the D note changes to a D minor chord, so which is formed by using a F note, that is a D minor chord. Now with the E note, what you can do is same thing, draw in the fifth, and then for the C major scale, the third is E, which is E minor. So for E minor, I'm going to draw in the G note. And similarly, you can work up the whole chord progressions for the C major scale that can be used, and then you can use all these chords in a different way uh, to have a different feel, which I will show you. Just give me a sec. Let's hear it, how it sounds. So that is basically what we've done is we formed the chord progression for uh, for the C major scale, like the chords uh, for the specific notes. For C it's C major, for D it's D minor, for E it's E minor, for F it's F major, and so on. But these chords can be used in a specific way to give a different feel, which I will talk about in a moment. That was for the major chord, and you can follow the same process for the minor chords and form the chord progressions for the minor scale. Now, the examples for the chord progressions are uh, on your screen. You can see it clearly here that you can form a C major, F major, and G major, D major, uh, G major, and A major. So you can give it a different feel by just using different combination of chord progressions. Now, I'll talk about music production. Basically, back in the days, music was recorded, mixed, and mastered and arranged. Like all of that stuff used to happen in the analog world, because uh, way back, let's say in the 1980s or 70s, or like even 90s, the digital audio world started to evolve slowly. But before the introduction of DAWs, which is this, it's a software that I'm using. It's called Logic Pro. It's from Apple, but there are a lot of companies which makes different DAWs. For example, FL Studio, Cubase, Pro Tools, Ableton, and there are numerous DAWs which you can use. But I prefer this because I'm kind of used to it. So back in the days, tape machines were used to record audio, and there was no computer used in the studio. It was the recording device was the tape machines, and hardware consoles were used to record, mix, and master your songs. So it was all analog stuff. But when the with the technical advancement, the we were able to produce music on just laptop or computer, and it got a whole lot easier for producers to make music inside their bedroom. And like you can literally make music anywhere you want. Right now you can even make it on the phone, like using GarageBand, and there are other apps. So things have become a lot, like it a lot easier. So there are 6 stages of music production. First you do the songwriting stuff, then you arrange it, then you record your instruments, guitars, uh, tabla, or any other drumming, like for example drums or any other instrument. You record it, you record your vocals, you do all that stuff, then you edit it. Then comes the mixing process. So mixing is basically, think of it as like you have uh, like all the ingredients, but the way you mix them in certain ratios, and you give it your own taste. So like then the final product, it comes out to be a whole lot polished, and it's not like unbalanced. So mixing is just like using the different elements, which are your instruments, for example guitars, uh, piano, string section, and uh, your vocals, drums, all that stuff. That is basically your ingredients that you're using. And then the way you mix them, set the levels, EQ them, compress them, add in time-based effects, and you all that stuff. Once you've finished doing that, you're done with the mix. That is basically what mixing is. Now mastering is basically polishing it and making sure that it translates well through all speaker systems. And like then there's the loudness war, which is basically like louder sounds better, because the human ear works in a uh, rather peculiar way, which is like if something is loud, you're gonna think that it is better than the one, like the other song, which is like a bit like quieter. But usually it's not the case. And right now like if you listen to songs, dynamics are destroyed. Like it's way too loud, and it like it doesn't have that variation in terms of dynamics, so you don't get that feel. So that's what's happening right now because of the loudness war, because loud sounds better, so everyone's just trying to uh, aim towards like getting their songs loud enough so that people like it. So that is what mastering is in like a basic definition. That's what the basic definition is. Now you must have wondered, because I did, like how songs are made. Because back in my school days, I used to think that songs are, they are recorded, like instruments are recorded, and like everything is recorded. Then I didn't know about mixing and mastering, all that stuff. I just knew like they're recorded and then like published. That's what I knew. But then I came across FL Studio, which is again, it's a DAW which you can use to record, mix, arrange, master your songs. So that's how I got to know about it. Now, there's one more thing which is kind of interesting, which is the use of software instruments. So I'll just show you right here. Software instrument is basically like if I add in a new, this is like I have different options here: software instrument, audio track, drummer track, external MIDI, guitar or bass. So if I select the software instrument track, I can load up variety of stuff. Like I can add in strings, for example. There we go, strings. One sec. That is out. But yeah, never mind. You get the idea what software instrument is. For some reason, I don't know. Something. Yeah, now it works. So this is basically a software instrument. So basically, what happens is uh, these, you know, the makers for the makers who basically made this software, like Logic Pro. What they did was they recorded string samples for each note. For example, for each specific note, they recorded the samples, and then after that, they kind of did their thing where they combined the samples together, and then you can do stuff like different articulations like staccato, sustain, and all that stuff with the strings. And basically, now you have the whole instrument in your hand. You can literally uh, join strings. You can program right here. You can do all sorts of stuff, and you don't need a musician now, which is, I think it's a bad thing to say, but still, you like there's a lot of like it's easily available. You don't need to call in musicians to record your songs, to record a piece of strings for you. You can just use the software instrument, which is right here, which I have used to make strings for a lot of my songs. uh, and it's easy. You can make music anywhere. For example, if I wanted some piano sound, I can load it up right here. So now we have the piano sound. So you get the idea, yeah? So that is software instruments and how music is made. That answers that question. And I also kind of talked to the process as well, I think, like the 6 steps of music production: songwriting, um, your arrangement stuff, then your recording stuff, editing, mixing, mastering. So that's how it works. That's how I got to know about it while my study at SAE Dubai. And yeah, so then versus now. So basically, as you can see here, this is a tape machine, and you cannot see any computer over here, but you can here, because back in the days, as I already talked about it, like they use tape machines as a recording device to record their the audio signal, to capture the audio. But right now we are using a computer. So basically what happens is uh, right here, yeah. So let's say you want to record your vocals. So you have the mic in front of you, and whatever you are singing, so basically it's nothing but vibration in the air. So what's happening is the air particles, they like move to and fro and they form a longitudinal wave, and the microphone captures it and converts that vibrational energy into acoustical energy. And then inside the microphone, depends upon the kind of microphone that you're using. If you're using a condenser microphone, it has like capacitor plates. And if you're using a dynamic mic, it uses the principle of electromagnetic induction to convert the acoustic energy into your audio signal or electrical signal. So right here the analog signal that gets converted into digital signal, and that digital signal is then processed by a digital signal processor. And what happens is the analog sound, it is converted into digital format, which is 0 and 1 binary. So that happens, and this is an important step because computers cannot understand analog signal. They can only understand 0 and 1, as you guys might be aware since you're like literally doing that stuff. So that happens, and once the signal is converted into a digital signal, then it comes back and to the digital to audio, digital to analog converter, and then the signal is converted into analog form, and through the speakers or monitors you hear the sound. So again, from acoustical energy or vibration energy, you get the output, which is the same. All that stuff that's happening in between is what happens in studios. So yeah, that's about it. About DAW and digital audio. So DAW is Digital Audio Workstation. So this is the software which does all the job right now. Like without it, I think there's nothing you can do right now except going back to the analog world. And it's a really, it's a different craft. It's like learning an instrument. Like when I learned tabla, it took me a lot of time to learn it. And same thing goes with the DAW as well. It's not like there's a button that you can press and make songs. It doesn't work like that. Many people have that myth, that. Uh, like these people, they work on laptops, they just press a button and then yeah, voila, music is made. It's nothing like that. It takes a lot of time to hone this skill, you know like the production skills, mixing skills, recording skills, mastering skills. It's a lot of stuff, it takes a lot of time. So this is a DAW, which is Logic Pro X. So it's like a canvas where you can like write, make the bass lines, make melodies, and do all of that stuff. And you can arrange, record, mix, and master your songs. Software instruments, already talked about it. Yeah, so EQ and compressors. So basically, when you hear a sound, you like when you're hearing a sound, you kind of notice that there's a no. Before I talk about this, let me tell you one thing. So the human ear can only listen from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. So if the sound wave is below or above that particular frequency range, you cannot hear it. And that's like a general statement from 20 to 20 kilohertz, but usually people cannot hear above 16 kilohertz, and below like 25 or something, not sure, but yeah, it's not like the exact figure. However, when like if you it's according to some studies, uh, small children, they can perceive higher frequencies as well as lower frequencies in a much better way than we can, because with time what happens is we kind of lose our ability to perceive certain frequencies because we are exposed to loud sounds continuously, and that's why we kind of lose that perception of those frequencies. Now, EQ and compressors. The Why do we need to use an EQ on any sound? So basically, if you're recording, let's say, a guitar, what can happen is you might have left the AC on. So there's that low rumble from the AC, which you might want to get rid of eventually. You obviously, like you don't want your mix to be a mess. So you're going to use the EQ to cut out the lows, which I'm going to show in a moment when I'm done with this. So you're going to use the EQ to roll up the lows, and that is number one, to get rid of unwanted frequencies. Number two is adding a bit of a flavor. So basically, for acoustic guitars, what you can do is you can boost the highs like right over here, which is like from let's say 8K to 20 kilohertz. You can do a little boost, and then it'll sound a little brighter in terms of like the frequency range. Now, that is the second point. The third point is basically to change the tonal quality of the sound, like overall, not like overall, but like, for example, if you're mixing and then your guitar doesn't stand out in the mix, you can do some EQ. You can boost some frequencies in the guitar channel, and you can cut out from the other channel which is masking it, and then you can make sure that it stands out in the mix. That's the role of EQ, and it's used to manipulate the frequency content of a sound wave. Now, there's another thing which is a compressor. So the reason why you would use a compressor is to manipulate the dynamics of a sound. So dynamics are basically, for example, I'm going to do it like right now. So focus on the clap, okay? So this is soft, this is loud. So that difference, that's what the dynamic range is. So the role of the compressor is to reduce that dynamic range so that it sounds even. Because like, if let's say for example, if you're watching a movie and you're like, there's a certain dialogue, there's an actor who's like who's in the scene, and let's say suddenly he gets way too loud, it's gonna, you know, mess around with your ears and you're not gonna like it. So that's why you're gonna use a compressor to make sure that the dynamics of the sound, they remain consistent and they're not abrupt. So that's the role of the compressor. So before I move any further, let me show you how it works in the digital audio workstation. First, let me get rid of this. I'm gonna load in one of my projects that I was working recently. It's a techno track. Um, just this. Hope you guys can hear it. So this is the lead melody along with the kick, which now if I wanted to make it a bit more brighter, what I can do is I can load up an EQ and first go through the frequency range of this lead, like what's the range. So it's working in this region. So what I can do is I can do a quick boost. See the difference? That's what an EQ does. Now, if I were to get rid of these low mids, see what happens. See how the sound changes. It gets thinner, you know. See? Now, if I do the same thing and remove the high frequencies, see what happens. So right now what I'm doing is I'm using a high pass filter and a low pass filter to kind of shape the sound and get rid of certain frequencies which you might want to do to remove unwanted sound which might muddy up your mix. And you can also like boost certain frequencies so that it kind of stands out in the mix, and to give it a shape, like to basically shape the timbre of the sound. That's about it. So that's the EQ. Now let's say if I wanted to do some compression on this lead, see what happens. So I'm gonna load up a compressor. So the compressor has, I don't know if I should be covering this, but yeah, why not? So basically, a compressor has mainly five knobs. The knee knob, it might be there sometimes, it might not be. So let's just consider these main five knobs, which are always there in a compressor, which is number one, threshold. Number two is ratio. Then you have the attack and release, and then makeup. So basically what happens is, if like as you can see here in this waveform, right, on the first channel, which is here, like this is the waveform. So if I zoom in, then this is what I get. So you see, that's a waveform. Now if this waveform, okay, so let's say if it's peaking at a minus 3 dB SPL, this particular waveform, for example, what I can do is, to bring down the dynamic range, I can set the threshold to, let's say, minus 9. So if it's on minus 3, if it's peaking at minus 3, I can set the threshold to minus 9. So once I'm done with that, I can set the ratio. Ratio basically determines how much of the signal above the threshold needs to be turned down in terms of loudness. So if I set the ratio to 2:1, that means whatever it's going above the threshold, it's gonna, what the compressor is gonna do, it's gonna turn it down in the ratio of 2:1. So if it, like, let's say if the signal is 9 dB louder above the threshold, so what it's going to do is, if it's set on 2:1, it's going to bring it down to 9 divided by 2, which gives us 4.5. Now, 4.5 dB, so it's going to bring it down to 4.5 dBs. And the attack and release knobs, what basically the main role of these knobs is, so since, you know, like if you're dealing with, for example, transient sounds, which is drum sounds, they have a lot of fast attack, which is called a transient. So for those sounds, you might want to use not too fast, not too slow, but somewhere in between. Because if you use like way too, like for example, a fast attack, what it's going to do is, it's going to get rid of the transient. Now, if I set the attack, let's say 20 milliseconds or something, like a slow attack, what's going to happen is, it's like, it's not, it's going to make sure that transient is not like manipulated, but the body will be, the like the signal after the transient will get manipulated. But if something is too transienty, you know, like I don't know if that's my word, but again, like if that transient is kind of too much, you can use a slow attack, sorry, fast attack, to kind of bring it down. Now, release is basically, what release is going to do is, once singlet is compressed, like the transient is compressed, the release basically determines like after how much time the compressor stops like working. Like, you know, I'll just show you. Enough done with the talking. Let me just show it to you. Yeah, so let's look at these hi-hat sounds. Yeah, so if I solo it, then I load up a compressor, look what happens. Now I have to set the threshold to a certain level. So right now, once I'm done with the threshold, I'm already seeing some gain reduction. I'm gonna turn down the ratio knob, so like it's 1:1, so it's literally doing nothing. Let's set the threshold to around, let's say the input signal is peaking at 0. Let's set it at around -9, and set the ratio to, let's say, 3:1. Now look at what happens when I change the attack. Just focus on the transient of the hi-hat, okay? Maybe a bit more. See that change? Like the transient is gone, and we are already seeing a gain reduction of almost like 5-6 decibels. Now if I increase the attack time, the transient, the sharp, that attack starts to come out. So that's about the attack knob. Now about the release knob, look at what happens. So basically, if you look at these waveforms, the release knob is basically, what it's going to do is it's going to determine like when the compressor starts to stop working in a way. So if I increase the release time, it's compressed forever, like it's not coming down to zero. So basically what I'm doing is basically just turning down the overall level of the sound. It's not compression, it's just turning down the whole level, so it doesn't make sense. So I'm just going to turn down the release knob, and then you see this needle, it's telling me the gain reduction, like what's happening with the audio signal. So sorry about that. Yeah, so see that? Notice the difference? That's what the job of the attack and release knobs is. And the makeup gain, why do we use makeup gain? So the reason is like when, let me show it to you. So basically what happens is when you're done like with the compression and stuff, let me just show it to you in a moment. So after the compression, the audio signal, like the overall loudness, it gets reduced. So in order to bring it up, what we do is we use makeup gain so that the overall loudness of both the signals, the uncompressed signal and the compressed signal, it remains the same. Because if there's a difference of loudness, ears are going to perceive it differently. Because like as I already told you about, like if it's loud, it's going to sound better. If it's quiet, maybe not. So that's about it for the compression part. Now what is next? Yeah, so mixing and mastering, this is like an entirely different craft, I would say, but I think it's not within this scope of within the scope of this webinar. So I'll just tell you, like, in the basic form what mixing is. So it's a different craft from recording, songwriting, and all that stuff. And mixing is basically, so let's say for example I have all these tracks here in my project. So if So think of them as like different elements, ingredients, or whatever. Now I want to make sure that the drums are kind of louder than the melodic section, the string section, the melodies, and the percussions. So basically, if I want the kick drum and the bass, I want the kick and the bass to be the driving force. Since it's a techno track, I definitely want that. And so basically, let's say if yeah, why not? Let's just mix it right now. If like that's cool with you guys. So first, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna mix this section because I'm not done with that, obviously. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select all the faders and I'm gonna turn them down. Cool, that is done. Now, where is the kick drum? It's here. So I'm just gonna increase the loudness in a way that it peaks at around -6 or something. Now comes the bass. So I kind of want it over there, like not exactly the same level as that of kick. Somewhere around there. Now the somewhere around there. Now the somewhere around there. So basically right now what I'm doing is I'm setting up the levels of the different tracks, like the kick track, kick channel, bass channel, and claps and percussions and all that stuff. Now mostly what happens is sometimes people confuse this leveling stuff with gain staging. Gain staging is different from leveling. Gain staging is basically making sure that whatever levels you've set while at the initial stage of the mix, when you're starting to mix, gain staging is to make sure that those levels remain same. Because if you add in plugins, for example, if I add a plugin on, let's say, this percussion itself, a distortion plugin, look at what happens. See, there's a change in loudness. If I turn it off, it's quiet. If I turn it up, it's louder. So in order to make sure, there's always a output knob on like plugins, that like distortion plugins or EQs or whatever plugins you use, there's definitely going to be an output knob. So basically it's just there to help you out with the gain staging stuff. So basically if like while using the plugin, if the level increases and you don't like set it up just the way you did, then it's gonna mess up with your mix. So you want to make sure that the input and output signal, the level is kind of same. Otherwise you're gonna ruin your mix. That's what mostly people like are doing right now. Like most, not gonna say like most of them, but like beginners, they do that thing. So let's see. It's quieter. Now it's louder. I'm gonna turn down output now to make sure it matches the same level. Still a bit loud. Yeah. Now it matches up. This is gain staging. Leveling is setting up the levels of different channels in a way that it is balanced. Because if you set all the channels at the same level, it's gonna sound bad. It's not gonna sound good. So that's about the leveling and gain staging stuff. So let's get on with it. Maybe it's too bright. Might wanna let's move forward with this one. So that's like my 40% of the job is done. So now basically what I have to do is I have to make sure that there's no masking. Masking is basically when two instruments or like two audio sources, if they have the same frequency content, then for example, there's a lot of stuff going from 400 hertz to let's say 1 kilohertz. Uh, in both of those instruments, what's going to happen is they're going to mask each other out, so you won't be able to hear clearly what's going on with each instrument individually. So what you do is you cut from one, you boost the other, and vice versa. So that's gonna like help with the masking stuff. So that's the next step that I'm gonna follow, and once I'm done with that, I'm gonna move on to the dynamics part. I'm gonna make sure that there's no any abrupt changes of levels in a certain sound, because it kind of it yeah, one more thing, which is like if there's too much dynamic range, what happens is you might not be able to achieve that certain loudness. So, because like there's one is peak, one is RMS, which is this. I'm gonna show it to you right now. Watch this meter right over here. So as you can see, it's peaking at -3, I would say, and then it's going down to around -9 or so. So there's like around 5 to 6 dBs of dynamic range. So it's peaking at -3, that's peak level, but the average level is around -6, -8, or somewhere around there. So if you compress, you bring up the average level, which is the RMS level. So when you compress, you increase the average RMS level. So if you do that, what's going to happen is our ears are going to perceive the sound louder. In like it's going to sound louder. So when you like listen to songs, they sound loud. That's the reason, because they do quite a lot of compression to achieve that loudness level. So that is the next step I'll follow after the masking stuff. Then there are time-based effects, which is reverbs, delays, chorus, flanges, phasers. All of that stuff is there, which basically sounds kind of like this. If I add a phaser on, let's say, one of the percussions, this is what happens. If you hear closely, you might be able to listen to what this plugin is doing. So I'll play it again. And it kind of sounds good, so I'm going to keep it that way. not that much though. Like, so yeah, that's the basics of mixing. There's a whole lot of stuff uh, out there. Like, there's a whole lot of stuff that you can do, and it's always about, it's always about, it's subjective basically. If something sounds good to you, doesn't mean it's gonna sound good to some other guy, and vice versa. So it's subjective. The way we perceive sound, it is always subjective. So basically, if someone likes a certain genre, you cannot blame him for listening to it because it's subjective. If he likes it, you know what to say. If you like something, then like, you get the point. It's subjective. So there's other stuff, like there's advanced mixing stuff that that I cannot obviously talk in this webinar because it's going to take ages, and it's something that you cannot learn in just one day. Yeah? And then there's mastering is basically, once I'm done mixing, I'm going to export all of this into one single waveform. Then I'm going to increase the loudness, give it like, improve the tonal balance, and basically prepare it for publishing. That is mastering. Now, I think I am kind of done with this stuff now. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was a great and informative webinar, and I hope this webinar tempted Joiny's interest in the music. Well, with that, we are open with our Q&A session. Now the questions will be displayed on the screen one by one. So the question asked by Karun Thakur is, if we compose music and it sounds good to us, but not for a professional, how can we recognize the thing we are composing it actually good or not?
Yeah, again, so basically, like I said, music is subjective. But again, like, if you're like a beginner, you're just starting out, definitely that's a question that always comes up in your head. Because I also used to ask the same question to me as well. Like, is it sounding good? Is it sounding bad? And because the thing is, you cannot tell if your music is like good or bad, because if you're producing and you spend hours on it, you get ear fatigue, and you get that kind of a mindset that whatever changes you make, it will sound good to you. But uh, definitely it might not. So like, the way you can recognize if it's good or not is using reference tracks. For example, if you're trying to make a song like like Martin Garrix or Armin van Buuren, or like Bollywood stuff as well. So the best thing to do is, what you can do is, you can use that as a reference track, whatever sound that you're looking for. For example, use any track by Martin Garrix and put it in your session. And after that, try to look at the the frequency balance, the spectrum. There's a plugin called a spectrum analyzer. Not a plugin like, it's there in stock EQs as well. So you can use that and see the frequency spectrum, and look at like what's going on, like from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. And then uh, you will get to know like how he has mixed his stuff. Like, for example, the drums, the melodic section, the strings, and all of that stuff. You can get to know about that. That's number one. Number two is, you can like put on, like there's a plugin by I forgot the name, but what it does is, it tells you the overall loudness and the frequency spectrum, the range, and everything. And one more thing is, try to basically, when you're composing, try in the beginning, what you can do is, you can try following the arrangement and the melodic section, how they've done it. Because like, following up someone's arrangement, that's not plagiarism, to be honest. You can do that, not exactly, but you can take inspiration from it. And apart from the arrangement stuff, you can look at how he has mixed different stuff, and like how the kick sounds, how loud is the kick, how how much of the sub frequencies are there in the kick, and you can listen to other instruments. Like, do critical listening, listen to every element clearly. uh, After that you'll get to know, and once you follow this thing, yeah, using reference tracks, your songs are eventually going to get better. So that's for sure, because I do that. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next
The next
question
question
is
is
FL
FL
Studio or
Studio or
Chord?
Chord? Well, like, that's always a bit of a question, isn't it? Like, it's not about what kind of uh, DAW you use, like which DAW you use, FL Studio, Logic Pro, Pro Tools, Ableton, Cubase, or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter what DAW you use. You should just know how uh, like it works, because every DAW has all the features. Like, not all the features, like, but like the basic features, the main features. Every DAW has that, and you can basically learn how to use different tools in whatever DAW you're using. So if you think that FL Studio it's not like a good DAW, I should probably switch to Logic. There are some things in FL Studio which might not be in Logic, and vice versa. So it's always a choice. Like, if it works for you, it works for you. If FL Studio, yeah, like you've been using FL Studio for years, you are better off with it. There's no need to switch. But if you want to try Logic, yeah, you should go for it. It has some features which FL Studio might not have. So it's always up to you what you want to use. But like, for example, if you own a Honda City car, and if you own some Hyundai car, it's both of them are cars, and both of them does the same job. It's just a matter of different features, which some features might be in this car, some maybe in this one. You never get uh, you never get like everything in, everything. Like, you don't get it. So it's up to you. It's your personal choice, bro. Hope that answers it.
One more.
One more. Bro, you have to buy it, bro. You have to buy it. It's around 15,000 or 16,000 rupees, I would say. I'm not sure at the moment, but somewhere around that range. That's how much it costs. Like 15,000, I would say. So if you can invest in it, good for you, bro. If you're looking for like a long term, like, if you're looking for like a career in music production and sound engineering and the audio world, then of course it's not a bad thing. You can invest in it, and yeah, that's about it.
So here
So
we are
here
with the
we are with
next
the next
question. Buy it
buy it
hard.
hard.
You're
Are you
planning. How
planning?
was
How was
it
it
to
to
switch to
predict? Bro, I got no clue about this. I don't know like what this is. So sorry, I can't answer that question.
no
No
problems?
problem.
So any
So
more
any more
questions?
questions?
Please
Please
drop
drop
in the
in the
comment
comment
box.
box.
So I
So
think
I
now
think now
it's to its
to its
end.
end.
We are done with our questions. So thank you, sir, for joining us, and also thank you to the joinees for being part of this webinar. Often we wait for an opportunity to strike our doors, but we forget the fact that opportunities lies around us. The rest depends on how we perceive the things. I hope you have a lot to take home from this webinar that can help you create an opportunity. Also, if you like this webinar, do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me. And if you have any further questions, you can drop it in the comment box, and I might answer them later on once we're done with the session. And big shout out to Aditya Verma, who is my mentor, who has always helped me with the music production and engineering stuff. He has always answered my technical questions regarding sound engineering. So yeah, big shout out to him. And Thank you so much, guys, for having me. Really appreciate that. Hope to,
Thank you, sir.
for future webinars. See you guys. Take care.